But for those of you who I haven't had the privilege of meeting yet, my name is Sydney. I am one of the PMs on the PowerShell team, and I own a variety of projects across PowerShell and the PowerShell tooling ecosystem. But one project that I have owned for the past 3 or 4 years from its kind of start and has been an absolute baby of mine, and something I have poured my heart and soul into, is the PowerShell Get V3 project. And so that's something I did want to provide an update on today and kind of wanted to dig into and talk about. So I wanted to kind of start by acknowledging what a journey this project has been. I think this is my third PSConfEU actually talking about this project. And I will say this is going to be the last one, okay? By next time, we'll be talking about the next version. So I can guarantee that. But we'll dig into the timeline, we'll dig into what's been going on and all that as we get into the presentation. But I just want to start by saying thank you for your feedback along the way. Thank you for testing our previews, and thank you for coming along with us on this journey, because it has been a good journey and a long one, and we're reaching the end. But with that, let's get into the content. I'll also say I'm going to try my best to leave room for time for questions. I said that really weird. I am going to do my best to leave time for questions at the end. That being said, if a question pops up, feel free to raise your hand throughout as well. And we'll just keep it really informal, casual, comfortable. Many thanks to our sponsors for making this wonderful, beautiful conference possible. Wanted to start off by defining some key terms so that as we go on throughout the presentation, hopefully we can all sort of be on the same page. First term, PowerShell Get V2 and V1. So start with PowerShell Get V1. PowerShell Get V1, PowerShell Get module that we all use to install, update, publish, find module scripts, DSE resources, usually on the PowerShell gallery, but sometimes a lot of us use other repositories, right? Which is something we'll be covering a lot of in the talk today. PowerShell Get V1 is the not so great version of PowerShell Get that ships today in box in Windows. 1001, that's the version that ships in Windows today. PowerShell Get V2 225, that's the version that ships today in PowerShell 7. And that's the latest stable version of PowerShell Get available today. So when we talk about PowerShell Get, we usually just refer to it as V2. PowerShell Get V2, that's what we're talking about. But I do want to acknowledge that V1 is actually the version that ships in Windows. But cool, comfortable with that term. Okay, PowerShell Get V3. So for a long time, we've been talking about this project, PowerShell Get V3. This is a new set of commandlets that was sort of going to revolutionize the way we installed modules. We introduced this new set of commandlets that was all about PS resources. So install PS resource, find PS resource, publish PS resource. We've been in beta for this. We've published now 22 beta releases over the past 3 years of this project. And just in the last preview release, we made a really big change. We introduced a new module, which we renamed this project. We renamed this module to be Microsoft PowerShell PSResourceGet. And so from here on out, I'm going to be referring to it shorthand PSResourceGet. And so this set of commandlets, install PS resource, find PS resource, publish PS resource, register PS resource repository, is now called PSResourceGet. When we developed PSResourceGet, we knew that we were making a really big breaking change from V2 to V3, right? Really big breaking change because we were changing the commandlet interface from install module to install PS resource. And so when we were doing that, we did consider how are folks going to make this transition? And so as we were doing that, we introduced a compatibility layer. And we called this Compat PowerShell Get. And what this compatibility layer was a module that proxied the V3 commandlets and allowed you to use the V2 syntax with the V3 engine, right? So what it did is you called install module, and behind the scenes, it was running install PS resource. So that was this module, Compat PowerShell Get. Long story short, and we can get, if people have more questions about this, I do have some links I can send you to GitHub issues where this is discussed in a blog post where I discuss this more. Also happy to dig more into this. But we made the decision to ship PowerShell Get V3 as the compatibility layer. So that means that PowerShell Get V3 is going to have the same commandlet interface as V2, but it's under the hood going to be calling the engine of PSResourceGet. Is that sort of vaguely clear to people? So PowerShell Get V3 takes a dependency on this PSResourceGet engine, but the commandlet interface is the same, right? So it kind of gives people two options, right? So like if you want to use the full feature functionality of PSResourceGet, where we did make some breaking changes, and we made breaking changes for a reason, and I'll get more into some of that as we go on through the presentation, about sort of why we made some of those changes, and I'm happy to speak more in depth about that as well. You can branch off and use PSResourceGet. Cool. You have tons of scripts written with install module with the old syntax. You want to just keep riding the update train with PowerShell Get. Don't want to worry about the major breaking changes. Going to keep working for you. For the most part, there are going to be like some small breaking changes. It is a major version update from 2 to 3. In my opinion, they're like appropriate breaking changes from a version 2 to a version 3 update. That's up to interpretation. It is documented. Can share that link with you as well. That's the gist of the new kind of terms we have. So we have PowerShell Get V1 and V2. Those are the ones you've known, been familiar with. We've got PowerShell Get V3, which is the compatibility layer. And I just want to be really clear. This beta hasn't shipped yet, but it should come out in the next couple of weeks. And then we have PSResourceGet. Beta is available today. And that will GA in the next couple of months, which we'll get to in a second. I'm going to pause here and see if there's any questions, because I know I just explained a lot. If some of you may have already been familiar with this change, many of you might not. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. So you're saying you had been using the betas already. In V2. Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So in the latest beta, we broke where registration locations. We changed the location of the PS resource repository XML file changed location. So yeah, you had to re-register all your repositories. It's a really good call out in terms of the compatibility scenario with PowerShell Get. So I definitely want to make a note of that since we're still in beta and see if we can address that. So I don't have a yes or no. The answer is if you're using betas, yes, the latest beta broke for you. The answer of whether or not when we GA, you'll have to re-register your repositories, I'd love if we could solve that before we hit GA. That being said, like hitting GA is coming up soon and tough choices. What? Oh, thank you. Yes, so the question is, I have, thank you so much for that. I've been watching speakers do this all week, and I'm like, I'm not going to make that mistake of forgetting to repeat the question, and then here I am, question number 1. Okay, so the question was, I had repositories registered with PowerShell Get V2. I'm going to eventually upgrade to PowerShell Get V3. Will I need to re-register my repositories? And my answer is like, hopefully not, but we did break that in the latest beta. Yeah. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, cool. First, slowdown reminder of the deck. Cool. All right, so I mentioned a little bit about this. Path to GA. This is really unclear so good thing I'm here to explain it, because if you just had the slide deck, you would have no idea what this means. Cool, so shipping in PowerShell 7.4 previews, that is PSResourceGet, is going to be shipping side by side with PowerShell Get V2 in PowerShell 7.4 previews. beginning with the next PowerShell 7.4 preview. The PR is already merged in. So as soon as the next PowerShell 7.4 preview comes out, which is like hopefully very, very soon, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, could be as soon as next week, side by side, PSResourceGet, PowerShell Get V2 will be shipping side by side in PowerShell 7.4 previews. So if you have stuff that's working with V2, it will continue to work. If you're curious about trying out PSResourceGet, you won't have to install it. It'll already be there in PowerShell 7.4 previews. That will continue into 7.4, which is an LTS release. This is why a big reason why we decided to ship this side-by-side scenario and not increment PowerShell Get to 3.0, which is the compatibility layer, and leave it at 2.0, right? It's an LTS release. We're coming in really hot, really late in the preview cycle. We're not going to break anyone as much as possible. But I think this is really important though. Like this is a really important path to GA note. We, as of 4 days ago, we merged a PR that PSResourceGet is now in PowerShell 7.4. What does that mean? It means that by the time PowerShell 7.4 RCs in September, PSResourceGet has to RC. Okay? If you're following, which means that if we want to give ourselves room for a second RC because we really might need one, that means we need to RC probably by like July or August. And what is it? It's like June 21st today. So it's go time. Yeah, that's what that means. That means like we have put ourselves in a position where it's shipping time, which I'm really excited about. Like it's a really good pressure point for us to say like, yeah, it's been 3 years. Our community has come along with us and it's go time. So I'm really excited about that. It obviously means tough decisions, and I'll show you guys really quick just like where we are in the repo so you can track that if you're curious. But that's what that means. We've committed to shipping in PowerShell 7.4. PR is in, it is merged, and we are doing it, and we are going to GA this fall, and it's going to happen. And I'm standing here and I'm saying that boldly, and I'm going to do absolutely everything we can to make it happen. When I say shipping in PowerShell 7.5, the plan is preview 1 of PowerShell 7.5 is when we plan to increment PowerShell Get to version 3 in PowerShell 7.5, which means it'll be the compatibility layer. And so the compatibility layer is PowerShell Get 3, right? So PowerShell Get 3, same syntax, but calling PSResourceGet under the hood. The idea is hopefully by then we have a really solid understanding that PSResourceGet is really trustworthy. PowerShell 7.5, not an LTS release, and we can come in and preview 1, give ourselves a longer preview cycle. That's kind of the rationale there. But we'll see how everything goes with 7.4. But hopefully shipping side by side gives us a little more wiggle room and still a really good pressure point to GA. I am taking up so much time, but it's all good. I do want to show you guys the repo real fast, just because I think it is nice for people to see in case you're not as active on GitHub, which I totally understand if you're not. But if you ever are curious to see like track this project or see how it's going, we'll continue to like make progress on this project once we hit GA. Like this is not like a GA, the engineering stops. We have plans to continue on with this project. GitHub.com/PowerShell/PSResourceGet. I'll just show you how, for this project, how we organize our work. So if you're ever curious and want to check in how the team's doing, what we're working on. We very heavily use projects in this. So you can see we're working on beta 23 right now. It might seem like there's a ton of, slow down, thank you. Might seem like there's a ton of work in here right now. These are error messages that we're working on. These are our P0s and our P1s. So this is the project we're currently working on. This is all the remaining work for GA right here. The remaining bug reports that we know of that are left, which is pretty cool. We're feature complete. This is the known work that we have left, but please do try it out. Open up bugs and we'll keep working on it. But I just wanted to show you guys that we heavily use projects to kind of like track this work, and you can always see exactly what the team is working on. It's totally open here. So with that, we can go back into the deck. I guess I'll pause again. Were there any questions about the stuff we just covered? Another little reminder. Well, I'll pause here too. Just another reminder, because I'll probably forget by the time we get to the end of our session. But I have a bag of stickers. They're the cute version of the PowerShell hero. Not the scary one, the cute one. So find me for these. I did hear a rumor that they're actually not very sticky, but they're still cute, and you can still use them. Okay, so what the heck have we been up to the last year? Some of you guys might have seen me at PowerShell Conference Europe last year. I gave a session about PowerShell Get. And so what have we been up to the last year? Well, we spent most of the last year getting off of the NuGet APIs. So the team, the PowerShell Get project was heavily using the NuGet APIs on the server side and on the client side. And so some of you may know that the PowerShell gallery is a fork of the NuGet gallery, and they've since diverged quite a bit since the original fork. And so similarly, PowerShell Get, pretty similar on the client side to NuGet. But so we were using the NuGet APIs, but then using a bunch of customization around them. And we thought that this was seemed like a really good approach. We were using an existing library and then kind of building around it. But the further we got into the project, the more we realized we had kind of dug ourselves into a hole with this approach. And the more we found that we actually can't solve this problem that we really wanted to solve. And so we finally got to a point where we said we just spent all this time kind of redoing this project because we really wanted to get it right. We really, really care about solving these problems with PowerShell Get. And we just invested all this time in it. And what if we take a step back, redo these APIs, and actually get it right? And so this was a really, really hard decision that we made. And so some of the considerations were, this allowed us to make some big performance improvements, allowing us to particularly add streaming and parallelization. This might seem like a small thing, but it allows us to add telemetry calls for the gallery, which allows us for support situations. A lot cleaner code and easier to maintain, and a lot of more specific PowerShell support. As we found, more and more of the APIs were very specific to NuGet gallery scenarios, and that wasn't something we had realized as much when we had started the project. We had a lot of situations where we were using 1 to 2 APIs that attempt to do something and then doing a lot of additional client-side filtering, which was causing a lot of performance impact for us. And so these were some of the big motivators for us to do this. And so we kind of made the tough decision and embarked on this journey and said, let's get this right. So some of the challenges, as I mentioned, this also allowed us to support V3 feeds. This was kind of part of the project. It was we're going to get off the NuGet APIs. We're going to build our own APIs. And then part of this was we also want to be able to support the PowerShell gallery, which is a V2 feed. We also want to support V3 feeds more generally, and then local repositories. So those are kind of our 3 scenarios. And so some of the challenges we faced in building these kind of 3 separate API feeds were just tough feature decisions as to what to support and what to invest in terms of how much extra work and time we were going to have to delay the project, which is, you could say this about any software engineering project, right? Ever. You're oh, I had to make tough decisions about which features I was going to support, right? But all of these repositories have different functionality, and they have different ways of returning packages, and they have different information and different response formats. And so we had to decide, are we going to support find all for this one and this one? Or are we going to do find tags for this repository or for this repository? And deciding what was the line for which made a set too expensive cost-wise, or what was too large of a set for us to return. And so we had a lot of these tough decisions to make. And I also mentioned this, variation in response format was a really tough thing for us to deal with across these various different repository types. Yeah, metadata returned. Dependency support. So this is something we actually still have decided not to support at this point in time. So we have dependency support for local repositories and for V2 feeds, but for V3 feeds at this point in time, we are unable to support dependencies. So when you install a package, you only get the parent package. And this is because dependency information is in the response is tied to the frameworks, and we don't have a structure to account for or recommend dependencies based on the user's framework. And then another big part of this was also building out our testing for all these different repository types and figuring out how to implement that in our CI with the right credentials, and then like working with partner teams to get the proper support from them. I'm still working with NuGet and I don't know if this is okay to say, but I'm still working with NuGet and Artifactory's like partnership teams to like figure out how to get them in our CI. So we just have like individual tests we have to run manually for them. So it's been a long process of like all these different repository types, right? And the different challenges of like each one. We really had this idea that like, oh, we're just gonna like support V3 feeds, right? And it's like, we'll just implement that and they're all gonna kind of like be the same. So we started with NuGet and we're like, we'll start with the NuGet gallery and we'll do that. And so we did NuGet gallery and we finished that and we're like, okay, cool, should all work now. And so then we went to test Azure Artifacts, nothing worked. And so we're like, oh, we'll just go to the Azure Artifacts team and like ask them why they're different. And so then we like spent time with their team and they're like, no, it's like NuGet that's different. So we like figured it all out with Azure Artifacts and we're like, cool, should work now. And then we went to test on GitHub packages and like nothing worked. So then we reached out to like the GitHub packages team, like did the whole same process with them. And they're like, no, they're like the weird ones. We have it like ours is normal. And it's like, this is like the process repeated itself, you know? And so it's just like, there are a lot of similarities, right? Like they're all like NuGet feeds, like they're all V3 feeds. In general, like they're all the same, but there are variations and the slight variations, right? In like the credential types or like the way the credential provider is implemented or in like the type of slight metadata differences. And so to get it all work consistently has been a big challenge for us. But this is where we landed. This is where we're at the moment. These are like our officially supported V3 feeds right now. So we have ADO public and private feeds, which turned out to be different. Once again, two different types of feeds. NuGet gallery, Artifactory, GitHub packages, NuGet, and then we have like local feeds, as in like file share, file-based feeds. PowerShell gallery. I'm wondering though, like we get these list of feeds like from my conversations with customers, from GitHub issues, from the community. I'm curious if there's any anything we're missing. Like, are there other types of feeds people are using with PowerShell Get or want to use with PowerShell Get that people are not seeing? Probit? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. And then one other thing I wanted to talk about before we get into demos is another part of our work with repositories that I sort of hinted at was the credential work. And so another feature that we added with PSResourceGet was credential persistence. So the idea is I want to provide my credentials at repository registration time, and then I want to be able to use those for find and install calls. And so to solve this problem, we used an integration point with secret management that I can show. And so at registration time, you can provide a pointer with your vault name and your secret name. And then it will use that to make calls for find and install. So this was a really helpful feature. You can use it with any vault you like. Secret management is not a dependency of PowerShell Get. So if you're not using the credential persistence feature, like you don't need those modules. But if you would like to use the credential persistence, you can use secret management once again with whatever vault you choose. So mention that. And then I was gonna jump into demos. I will just follow up. I think I just have 3 slides left. So I think I'm just gonna finish my slides actually. and then demo. Cool. So this session was called like what's new with PowerShell repositories. So I figured like some people might see that and like be like, maybe she should talk about the PowerShell gallery or have questions about the PowerShell gallery. So I figured I'd make a slide on like what's been up with the PowerShell gallery, like what sort of we do with that. I would say like the big focus, the main things we work on with PowerShell galleries, our focus is on security, availability, reliability. Like that is the core work we do with PowerShell gallery. You probably have noticed if you use PowerShell gallery, like there's not a lot of feature work going on. There's not a lot of like UI updates happening, stuff like that. We are doing a lot of behind the scenes compliance work. That is like, if you saw our like spreadsheet where we track our work, like fundamentals, baby. That is PowerShell gallery. We are an Azure service, and that means we do a lot of necessary behind the scenes work, which is great. And that has been our focus. So our short-term plans include more bug fixes. I think the one that's really, really, really top of mind for me, some of you may know our SMTP relay, which is our email provider. It's the thing that like there's various parts of the PowerShell gallery which like trigger an email. It's been broken for a while. Really needs to get fixed. I think that would be like my number one thing. But bug fixes in general are definitely like our top priority with gallery right now. But medium to like longer term plans definitely focus on repository and package and author trust, and making that experience better. Things along the lines of having like a sub like trusted repository or having like trusted authors, and more verification around that so you can be more sure of, for example, like when somebody says that they're Microsoft on the PowerShell gallery, you have more trust that they're actually Microsoft. Things along those lines, and definitely more information on that to come. But was there any questions on PowerShell gallery or things people wanted to address there? Yeah. Okay. One more thing. In regards to PSResourceGet, we are planning to have a public bug bash. Pretty fun. We did a team-wide bug bash. I don't even know when. It was like in May or something. Yeah, it was actually Mother's Day weekend, like the Friday before. I told the team, I said, this is going to be the best bug bash of your life. Like, we had so much fun. We really did, to the point where everyone was like, you should take this public. Like, people would have so much fun. So we're like, why not? So we're planning to have one. I think the date is July 11th, but I'm not 100% sure because I want to optimize for time zones. So I hadn't picked an exact time. So if you are interested in joining the bug bash, it'll be very fun and interactive. It'll be on a public Teams meeting. We'll run through some scenarios together. You'll get a chance to like try things out on PSResourceGet. If you're interested, follow me on Twitter. It's Sydney Smith Real. I'll be posting the information. You can unfollow me after that if that was the only reason you were interested in following me. But I promise I only post PowerShell content. Yeah, that's that. Okay, so we have 15 minutes left. And what I was planning on doing for my demo time was I have all of these repositories registered. So it's all the ones we just talked about. I have an ADO private feed, ADO public feed, GitHub packages feed. I have a Artifactory feed, a NuGet feed, NuGet gallery, PowerShell gallery, local feed. I was going to show you guys how to set these up, how to register them, how to use the credential persistence feature, that kind of thing. Happy to do that if people want to see that. If that's interesting, with the thumbs up, thumbs down, or something more interesting people would want to see? Cool. I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up, so we'll do that. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is unregister all of this stuff, right? So this is what we do. We just pipe it to unregister. Now we're free. Okay. The one thing I'll show you, if you guys haven't already been seeing this, I'll just show this too because it's like, this is also big enough. We're cool. Okay. So you'll notice I am using the history predictor and I have it in list view. If you're using the history predictor and you want to switch to list view, it's F2. It's kind of like convenient for me, but hopefully it's not bothering anyone. Okay, so first thing I did is just, there's a switch to register PS gallery. So if you ever end up in a state where you're like, oh no, I unregistered the PowerShell gallery and I don't really want to like figure out what the URI is, just switch. Cool, fun. Okay, we'll start off really simple. Let's register ourselves a local repository. So simple. I'm just putting it in my documents folder. And then you probably don't need to see this if you've ever, but maybe some of you haven't ever registered a local repository. Like, you can put it anywhere on your file system, and then you can just publish packages there in the way you would publish modules anywhere. You just use the publish PS resource commandlet, a path to a PSD1. You don't need credentials or anything. Pass it right on. I already published a resource there, so let's see if it's there. I went ahead and pre-published resources to all of these repositories just so we didn't have to go through that kind of step. And we could just see that things were there. Okay, cool. It worked. Yay, we have a repository there. Or a package there. Local. We're cool. Next thing I wanted to show was NuGet gallery. Okay, so once again, we'll do register PS resource repository. So I have NuGet gallery here. You can see that the URI is that. If you're like, cool, Sydney, but like, why are you showing me this? Like, I'm never going to remember that. I will say that I did have a very timely blog post that I may have timed quite well for this conference that I released like a week ago or so. I detailed everything I'm about to demo. If you go to PowerShell, devblogs.microsoft.powershell.com, it's like one of the most recent blogs. It's from June 9th. So it's right here. So if you want to like go back and follow along on everything, information is here. Hopefully I'll get this merged into like a formal doc soon too. But until it is formalized, blog. Cool. And so this is kind of cool in new features of V3. First of all, you'll notice it's just like a simple URI parameter. In the past, there was like multiple parameters. You had to like publish, source, location, and then also, yeah, there was no V3 support. So you couldn't have used the NuGet gallery. And so now if I like want to just like find package from, let's do find PS resource. I always just like use newtonsoft.json because it's like the first package on the NuGet gallery. Okay, so like, there we go. We like found a package from like an arbitrary nupcag. This is not a PowerShell module. It's just arbitrary nupcag. It's a that's one of the reasons why we changed to PS resource, because we're not just looking at modules anymore, right? We can do other types of resources. Pretty cool. And we can even install them. So we could, there we go. This is probably going to give me an error because I already installed it. So I'm going to, we'll see. We'll see how, maybe it won't. The packages. Yeah, so you're going to see this warning message is what it's saying is that dependencies are not currently supported. So that's going to be a post-GA. That's like an example of something we're going to work on post-GA. I didn't really get into the technical details, but it's really tricky for us because we don't have, nupcag doesn't have a PSD1. PSD1s are what we use for dependencies. A little tricky. Something we're going to work on in the future. Cool, though. Kind of cool, right? Like we can, it's not a module. Yeah. Yeah, so that's a really good question. So this is actually just going into the same location where modules are stored right now. Exactly, yeah. Yep. Oh, and to repeat the question is like, where is this getting installed to? And then the answer was it's going to get installed into the same location where your modules are getting installed. So that depends, right, if you're like admin or current user context, but yeah, your modules folder. Okay, cool. So like now we can step it up. Let's go to Azure Artifacts feed, ADO feed. See how we are on time. We still have like 10 minutes. Okay, cool. We might get through all of this. ADO public feed. We can start with this one because it's a little simpler because it doesn't require credentials. This one I took is actually from our testing. I can show you this, where I took this from. Okay, cool. So this is in the PowerShell, or sorry, PSResourceGet repository. These are all of our test files. These are the different tests we have. So this is like ADO test, GitHub package test, local test, V2 server test, V3 server test. This is like a public feed we made to test against. I will say if you want to just not have to create a public feed, test out how the commandlet works, and that's all. Feel free to like hit this, but please don't like hit it a bunch of times for fun. I promise all it has is this dummy package in it, test local mod. So there's nothing fun about it, but like it's an open source, so it's like I'm not giving away any secrets. This is just a dummy fake public feed, right? For our CI. But for the sake of this demo, that's what this feed is. So now find PS resource. What was it called though? Test. There we go. Cool. We love when it works. Super simple, right? Like we didn't have to do much, just works. Just the URI. Awesome. I feel like it's like it feels like not that impressive and exciting because it's like it's all just working. But if you've tried to do this in the past and you knew the pain of it never working, you'd be like, yeah, this is awesome. Okay, well now we'll do a private feed because that's a little bit more exciting. And I have one in one of my tabs. Okay, my feed. So this is, if you have an Azure DevOps account, or you can make one. You go to like artifacts, you can make yourself a feed. So what you're gonna do is then go to like, if you go to connect to feed, you get feed, you can get your like feed right here. Like just, this is what I do. Just copy that directly. That's your URI. To get your PAT, go here, personal access token. That's where I get my PAT. It's gonna give you like a really long list of potential options for like what you want to give your PAT access to. I'm gonna trust you to read through that and give yourself the right permissions. We're not gonna go through that right now, but like, yeah, you got that. I will say it's like a long list and like make sure you read through it because I have not read through it and just like started like clicking and then I like go to make my feed and it doesn't work and it's like unauthorized. So actually read it. But I did already set it up. So if we like do get secret info, I have a secret store set up. It's my vault name, secret store, with my creds pre-populated for this demo. One for ADO, one for GitHub packages, and one for my artifact refeed JFrog. My cred is just my username, which is my Microsoft email in this case. That's what my DevOps account is, and then my PAT that I got from there. So that makes sense. And so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to register my ADO feed there. And then if I do, you'll notice that I didn't provide my credential info here. I could have if I wanted credential persistence. I can also do it the old-fashioned way. And provide my credential at find resource time, right? I just credential parameter called get secret on my cred. I'll also show you how to use the set provide credential info. And I'll do that shortly because I'm about to run out of time. But you can see one other thing I'll point out. I called on it on Newtonsoft JSON. Again, that's because I'm kind of lazy and I didn't want to take the time to like populate my feed. ADO feeds have upstream sources, and NuGet gallery is one of the upstream sources. So I just connected it to my upstream source and it pulled it from there. So that's kind of what was going on there. Okay, now we will look at GitHub packages. So we have some GitHub packages set up on our PowerShell team account. So you can see I'm under my packages tab on my PowerShell org packages. I've got these like just dummy test packages, right? Set up for my testing and demo. So we're going to play with these. I will say that, in my opinion, compared to like all of the repositories we support, GitHub is the most tricky. But if you give yourself 30 minutes, I think you got it. Like, I was a little intimidated to set up GitHub packages, if I'm being totally honest. And it actually ended up going pretty smoothly once I got the hang of it. So I will register my GitHub repository, and then you'll see the way that the URI is structured. NuGet, that's the type of package feed I have, package github.com, and then it's your names, whatever your repository namespace is. So ours is the PowerShell org, right? So it's PowerShell. And that's the structure of the URI. And you'll notice I didn't add my credential info, even though I just said I was going to. But let's create... Okay. There we go. Okay, so there's one step to create your credential info object. So you're going to have to create this credential info object. There is documentation on this. You're going to create this object. You're going to provide the name of your vault. So that's SS, and the name of the credential. That's a GH cred. That's my GitHub cred. So once I've created my credential info object, then I can use set PSResourceRepository on the name of my repository, GH, credential info, cred info. And now that I have my credential info set all up, I can just call find on my test module, repository GitHub, and I didn't need to provide my credentials. Once again, like I could also, one thing I'll also mention is instead I could have provided it at like registration time. So that would be something like that. One other thing we added in in PSResourceGet, I'm still calling it V3, is a force parameter to register, which is kind of handy because sometimes you're like, I don't know if I already have this repository registered. I don't really care. I just want you to register it under that name, right? So I could also do that. Cool. I am totally out of time. I didn't get to show Artifactory in NuGet, but they follow the same exact pattern from the user experience as the other ones. I am more than happy to answer absolutely any other questions. I will just share a few other really quick resources that I didn't mention. Check out the docs. Here's an example, how to add credentials, Get V3. Sean has done an amazing job documenting this module, even though it's only in preview state. Give us any feedback on GitHub and continue to follow us on the PowerShell devlog site. Thank you so much for attending this talk and this conference. Get stickers from me. I'll try and get out of Jeff's way as he gives the next talk. And ask me any questions after the session. Thank you so much.